All right, it's going to be a busy morning for the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr. Not really that many weeks into the job, and he's got a lot of reading to do today. A comprehensive, we're told, Mueller report that is out after what they waited, 675 days for this? So it's got to be a lot of pages there. He's going through them page by page. We're told he wants to get at least some bullet points out to folks. Sometime this weekend, David Spunt is at the Justice Department with the very latest. Hey, David.
Hey, Neil, good morning to you, and good morning from the Justice Department. The Attorney General, William Barr, just got here within the last 30 to 45 minutes, and as you said, he does have a lot of reading to do. But this is not something, this Mueller report, that's going to be going around to all staff members here at the Justice Department. A select group of people are going to be looking through it with the Attorney General today, not something that's going to be circulating, being emailed around at the Justice Department. Now, Special Counsel Mueller has been deliberate since he took over this investigation almost 2 years ago, Neil, to keep this from leaking to the public. Many would say he's done a great job because we still don't know exactly what's in this report, hoping to find out as soon as possible. We do know, though, that the Attorney General Barr got a hold of the report yesterday afternoon, and we know that he and his team are reading it. Now, this comes the important task to decide what can be released to Congress. Many members there asking to see it, and what can be released to the public. Barr said from the moment that he came to office earlier this year, he would be as transparent as possible. But there's always that catch, Neil, as you know, that parts of the report could be classified and could pose a risk to national security, which could delay things a little bit more. Meanwhile, a senior DOJ official told Fox News yesterday, shortly after the report was sent to the Justice Department and submitted, we found out that there would be no more indictments in this case. In fact, Barr said he may be in a position to brief members of Congress as early as today or perhaps tomorrow as some of the contents of the report. Again, though, Neil, this report being reviewed right now by the top person himself, Attorney General William Barr, probably some select staff members not being emailed around. But when will we see it? When will members of Congress see it? That's what we're waiting to find out the contents as soon as possible. Neil.
All right, David, thank you very much. David Spunt at the Justice Department. We told you a little early that House Democrats are planning on holding a conference call on this, but it's just among Democrats. So this guy is man out. He cannot participate in that. The Republican House Intelligence Committee member, Chris Stewart. Congressman, no Republicans invited. This is a Democrat-only conference call. What do you think of that?
I think it's going to be the most depressing call that they've had for a long time. I think you got a lot of disappointed Democrats who have been hoping and making claims for years. As I think you played that clip of Beto O'Rourke, where they've been saying very definitively, we have evidence of collusion and conspiracy. This president conspired with Russia. He should be held accountable. And now it turns out that once again, by the way, the fourth investigation, there's virtually no evidence of that. And it leaves many of them, I think, to have to answer some questions. Frankly, I think some of them should apologize to some of these innocent Americans who've had this cloud hanging over their heads if they've been accused of very serious crimes. And again, without any evidence to support that.
You know, they counted a lot of the Democrats. Well, look at all the arrests and guilty pleas involving everyone from the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort, the former campaign chair, a former advisor Roger Stone, and Michael Cohen, the personal lawyer. These Russian nationals who were fingered by Mueller, but obviously Russia wasn't going to let them come here to face the music. With those 37 indictments and/or guilty pleas for the Mueller folks, mission accomplished. Tawdry performance and conduct on the part of top Trumpites. What do you think?
Well, I think there's some of these individuals who obviously had some illegal activity, participated in illegal activity, and they should be held accountable for that. And I've never objected to that and never would. But that's not what we were told. We weren't told that Paul Manafort had some illicit activities 10 years before he started to work for President Trump. We were told that President Trump and his campaign and people associated with him were colluding and conspiring with Russian agents during the campaign. And none of that has borne out to be true. And it's also, Neil, I think, fair to point out and to remember that for some of these individuals, they're accused of crimes and have been, in some cases, pled guilty of crimes, which occurred after Mr. Mueller was given the responsibility of acting as special counsel. Again, coming back to the point that none of these are crimes that were participated during the campaign, as we've been told for a couple of years that they had been.
Would you support an effort to subpoena Bob Mueller himself to talk to your committee, other committees? That's something Adam Schiff has been kicking around.
Yeah, well, I think that we probably should, although we're certainly not going to learn anything new. But I've always been in favor of transparencies. I've been saying for months that this report should be released. I would like the work we've done on the House Intelligence Committee, I would like for that all to be released for a couple of reasons. One is American people deserve to know, after, again, years of hearing these accusations, for them to know the truth. And the second thing is anything that isn't released, like if there's a paragraph or a sentence of the Mueller report that's redacted, people will point to that and say, see, that's where the conspiracy is. That's where the collusion is. They just aren't showing it. They're not telling us. And I think get it all on the table. Let the American people see it. Let them draw their own conclusions. And I think that's better for all of us if we do that. And if Mr. Mueller can add to that by coming before the committee, I would invite that. Although I don't think we're going to learn anything new, and we're certainly not going to learn anything dramatic by having him appear before us. I'd be very surprised if that wasn't the case.
Do you think, Congressman, the president has a right to read this report before you and your colleagues, Democrat or Republicans, do?
Well, I do, and I don't think that should trouble people. This is a prosecutorial report. It is by its very nature biased. He's not there. He has no requirement. When I say I mean Mr. Mueller. Right. He has no requirement at all or any obligation to put in any exculpatory information. This is just his view as he sought to prosecute a case. And I think it's perfectly fair for the president or for any defendant to have an opportunity to reply to that. And to be able to say, well, this is some background information that casts it in a different light. I think that would be fair for the president. I think it would be fair for any individual to be able to reply to something before a very one-sided report. And that's not a criticism, Mr. Mueller. I want to be clear. It's just the nature of his work that I think it would be fair to allow them to reply to that.
Congressman, thanks for coming on Saturday. We do appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
All right, we told you about this report out that could be, a breather for the president. But then there's the issue of the markets, and we told you about that earlier. They were a little crazy. Then there's this separate issue on the president declaring that ISIS is now dead. He used a map to indicate that ISIS has been defeated. And now some top generals are saying, well, not so fast. Answer this. We are indeed cognizant that other things are going on in this world, including the president announcing that ISIS has been defeated in Syria. There's a back and forth on that. Lauren Blanchard is in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Hey, Lauren.
Hi, Neil. Well, we are expecting a statement from the White House today, but the president has been teasing this announcement for a couple days now, that the ISIS caliphate has officially been wiped out.
So here's ISIS on Election Day. Here's ISIS right now, if you look. So there's ISIS, and that's what we have right now, as of last night. That's what we have right now. You guys can have the map. Congratulations.
A spokesman for the U.S.-backed Kurdish-led forces tweeting in part, Syrian democratic forces declare total elimination of so-called caliphate and 100% territorial defeat of ISIS. During the nearly 5 years fighting ISIS in Syria and Iraq, U.S. military aircraft have dropped over 100,000 bombs on ISIS. Some 11,000 U.S.-backed fighters and thousands of civilians have been killed, as well as 17 American soldiers. All once-held ISIS territory has been eliminated, including the last ISIS stronghold in eastern Syria. The French Defense Minister Florence Parly tweeting that the territorial defeat was a collective success, but cautioning ISIS has not disappeared. Parly visited the Pentagon earlier this week, however, would not commit to keeping French forces in Syria. The British Foreign Secretary also calling the ISIS defeat a historic achievement. Quote, but the fight is not over. So what's next? The fear from military leaders is that while the physical territory may be gone, ISIS fighters and those who want to preserve the ideology are still a very real global threat. And Neil, just a few minutes ago, the Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying even with this news, the mission has not changed and there's still work to do to make sure radical Islamic terrorism doesn't continue to grow.
Okay, Lauren, thank you very, very much. Lauren Blanchard, by the way, having nothing to do with Lauren, we mistakenly showed some video there, I believe, of the USS Cole bombing back in 2000. That obviously was not ISIS-inspired. But back to the point the president makes, that they're done, they're finis. they've been defeated. Let's get the read on that from retired U.S. Army Colonel Bob Maginnis. Colonel, what do you think of what the president's saying? They're done.
Well, it is a major victory, Neil. There's no question about it. I see this as a victory in terms of taking back the land. They had UK, United Kingdom size piece of terrain, 12 million people, and now they don't control land. They have really morphed into an insurgency, and they'll continue with the thousands of people that are embedded within the refugee population, etc. What I'm concerned about is that we continue to have ISIS presence in Afghanistan and certainly in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, and North Africa and the like. The ideology, as your reporter indicated, is real, and it has to be defeated on cyberspace, and yet we continue to fight violent extremist organizations, not just ISIS but others around the world. So yes, it is a milestone. No, they are not totally defeated. The caliphate is on its heels, and they will continue to have a presence, albeit behind the scenes.
You know, obviously terror groups morph into other terror groups. We saw that, if you go back even to the attacks on 9/11 and the Taliban, and then it becomes Al-Qaeda and then Boko Haram, and they morph into ISIS, which morphs into other splinter groups. How worried are you about that, and whether they in fact need land at all, or a station or base at all to conduct those attacks?
They don't need land. We've seen what Al-Qaeda can continue to do from the tribal region of Pakistan. We've seen what has happened with the groups that are going into Western China. We've seen what Boko Haram has become in Nigeria. And we've seen even in this country, through cyberspace, the radicalization of individuals that go after our police and after our law enforcement officials, and of course what's happening in Western Europe. So these things will continue. I think the president's national security strategy and the national defense strategy are right. They identify two near-peer rivals, but then they also identify violent extremist organizations that's going to keep us very busy for decades to come. We've reached a milestone with ISIS, and I celebrate what the president has been able to do, because I don't think if he had been in there, we wouldn't be where we are today.
This might be outside your normal purview, but I'm curious of a military guy's read on this. If the president is somewhat exonerated in the Mueller report, that in other words, it certainly would stymie the impeachment effort, which obviously cuts to the core of our, the president of the United States, getting dragged through hearings and the like. Militarily, or for our national security, I would imagine that would be deemed a relief.
Well, it is a relief, Neil. Certainly, Vladimir Putin in Moscow and President Xi in Beijing, watch with bated breath the president's troubles here in Washington with its own Congress. Those enemies, and I call them enemies with good reason, they are now, I think, going to sit back and watch and see what happens here in Washington, whether or not the president is weakened, because they are being very aggressive across the world. And it's important that our president be empowered to do the types of things that he must do to defend this country. I see today as far more dangerous than we were in 1938 as we faced the Nazis and the Japanese just before they launched attacks into Poland. And of course, they attacked us on December the 7th, 1941 in Pearl Harbor. These are dangerous times, and I hope that the American people wake up, empower our country to defend itself against the adversaries that we face.
Well, that is well put. I want to thank you for joining us on a Saturday.
Thank you.
And for your incredible service to this country. Right or left, that's pretty amazing. Colonel, thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, well, the investigation is over. The rush to make it public is on. And all of this is the Attorney General of the United States is holed up in that building, going through it page by page. After this. All right, this is a new video coming in our newsroom right now showing the Attorney General Bill Barr arriving at the Department of Justice, where we're told he has now been reading the Mueller report. We don't know how many pages that report is. It suffices to say when it's been called comprehensive, and this has gone on for the better part of, 675 odd days, that there are a lot of pages to that. I don't know if the Attorney General is a speed reader. It might not matter. There's a lot of reading to do, whether you're doing it fast or at a normal pace. Let's get the read from former Whitewater Independent Counsel Robert Ray. I don't know if he's a speed reader. I do know that he made quick work of an investigation into Bill Clinton, real estate and related deals back in the 90s with us today. That process, everyone wanted his uncle at the time wanted it released and in their hot little hands, and you were facing that pressure. That versus this, what do you think?
It's not too much different. I mean, understand that we don't have an independent counsel statute any longer, but the same concerns are present, right? We still have the end of an investigation, findings and conclusions with regard to that investigation, which are of paramount national interest, and an understandable, desire on the one hand to be as transparent, as forthcoming as you can be, but also to be fair about that process as well. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, the Attorney General wasn't at the Department of Justice late last night and into this morning, for no reason. They're obviously giving that their undivided attention.
Well, presumably he's going to put out bullet points and whatever from that report. How does that process go?
I think what he said in his letter is that he intends to get back to the committee chairman and the ranking members on those the 4 key committees, or I guess 2 key committees.
This weekend.
This weekend, and it may be as soon as the end of today.
Yeah, because those Democrat heads of those committees are all meeting at 3 p.m. today. Do you think they would have it by then?
I think they may have the benefit of what the Attorney General thinks are the principal findings and conclusions as the results of the Mueller investigation, sure.
All right.
Now, is that going to be enough to keep them happy? Of course not. I mean, I suppose at some level, no matter what happens here, it's not going to be enough to keep some people happy, no matter what you do.
Well, including Eric Falwell, the California Democratic congressman who just might be a presidential aspirant. He's already drawn some conclusions and has a couple of ideas. This is from the Congress. I want you to react to this.
Here's what's important, is that the public sees the report contemporaneously with the president. He should not be allowed to edit. He should not be allowed to restrict or sanitize. And Mueller has to come before Congress and tell us its veracity as far as what Barr.
Can you make that happen?
Yeah, we're going to subpoena him, and Adam Schiff announced that.
You subpoena Mueller?
Subpoena Mueller. What do you think?
They have the power to do that. I expect that in all likelihood, Mr. Mueller would respond and appear. But also, I believe the Department of Justice will stop at the water's edge of releasing what they intend to release from the Mueller report. And if Bob Mueller appears in Congress, I suspect that he will not talk outside of that report. I think, as a policy matter, the department owes it, and the Attorney General was clear that he will be as transparent as he can be under the law. But I think that means that that's going to be the end of it. And any attempt by the Democrats to sort of, lurch behind those findings and conclusions to actually get, every single thing that the special counsel did, I don't think that's going to happen. I think those subpoenas will be resisted, and I don't think there's any court that's going to compel the department to turn over what the department doesn't want to turn over.
Do you think, Robert, the issue of the Russians in cahoots with top Trump confidence, if not Donald Trump himself, to rig the 2016 election has been put to rest?
I hope so. I mean, I don't think there's any question what the intent of the Russians were. And I think that it's also clear that Bob Mueller, made some determinations in that regard. Obviously, he returned charges against Russian nationals. But that's a long way away from saying that officials in the Trump campaign were in.
Yeah, they drew a distinction
in collusion with.
You would always reminded me, Neil, make sure you get the distinctions clear. That no one has been charged with directly conspiring with the Russians to help Donald Trump get elected. Yet Democrats have pointed to the 37 indictments under guilty pleas involving everyone from Michael Flynn to Paul Manafort to Roger Stone as evidence of dishonest individuals who lied.
That's why we have an investigation. Right. Bob Mueller's mandate and charter was to press to find out an answer to that question. I think we're going to be close to finding out that answer. I do think the American people are entitled to findings and conclusions as they relate to the president with regard to those 2 core issues. One is on Russia collusion, and the separate issue with regard to obstruction of justice. And I do think that in one fashion or another is going to be delivered to Congress. And then Congress can, House can decide.
Well, how does your report handle? I mean, you don't make these are impeachable offenses, right? I mean,
no.
So the House can seize on what it wants, right? We believe this merits a further look, or is a high crime or misdemeanor to go after the president, right?
I think it's important for the American people to understand the distinction between, did Bob Mueller choose not to proceed against the president because he was prevented from doing so under existing department policy not to be able to charge a sitting president, or instead...
What were you at the time? Different case, I know.
Sure, but I was certainly... I wasn't bound by Department of Justice policy, but I was bound to consult it. And remember, when I came in at the end of the Clinton administration, the second term of the Clinton administration. So, my principal charter was to decide what to do about potential criminal misconduct and whether to charge it after the president left office. So a little bit of a different situation. Here, though, I think the American people need to come to understand, did he choose not to proceed because of department policy, or did he choose not to proceed because he didn't find there to be sufficient evidence? And in that, if it's determined that he chose not to proceed because of lack of evidence, I think that takes the air completely out of the sails of any attempt to now press forward, as many Democrats want to do with impeachment proceedings.
Right.
I think that ought to be the end of it.
Did you have anything that exists today with all these investigations going on in the Manhattan U.S. Attorney's Office, 3 other attorneys' offices of Brooklyn, the District of Columbia, what's going on in the Eastern District of Virginia, looking at everything from the Trump Foundation, the Charity Foundation, to Trump business dealings? Did you have anything like that was ancillary to what you were investigating?
No, and the reason for that was the independent counsel statute. To the extent that there needed to be additional authority, there was a mechanism in the independent counsel statute to go to the court after consultation with the Justice Department.
So this complicates things this go round.
It does, but remember also that all of this is under the auspices of the Department of Justice. Bob Mueller is a special counsel who existed under department regulations, and U.S. attorneys' offices report to Main Justice in Washington. So again, I think it's unrealistic to think that now that the Mueller investigation has ended, that these other investigations should just be a stalking horse for the continuation of the Mueller investigation. No.
But they'll continue. They've morphed off into their own...
They can, but they do so under the supervision of the leadership of the Department of Justice, and I expect that that leadership will exercise control over those continuing investigations, as they should.
Do you think, though, that now Bob Mueller risks going from hero to GOAT in the eyes of some Democrats who are disappointed?
Well,
way too early.
As a former independent counsel, we all worry about that. As I have said many times, including to you, I always felt fortunate as the result of the experience to have left Washington with my head still on my shoulders and my reputation reasonably intact. And that's something that, in the political process, things have a way of turning in a hurry depending on, whose ox is being gored and where the politicians in a presidential campaign and all these other things come into play. So, look, that's certainly possible.
That's a risk.
You know what? But I believe that with regard to big matters, the country gets things right. And I also believe that, ultimately the truth wins out. Bob Mueller is a person of significant experience and integrity, and so they can try that, but the American people in their good judgment understand that they owe him a great debt of gratitude, having conducted a full and fair investigation over 22 months that has now concluded. As I had hoped, we talked about it previously, it's in the country's interest now that we move on.
Finally, does it mean anything to you that in that investigation Mueller never got to talk to Donald Trump?
I think that was a significant moment. I think experience has shown him. I put my white-collar criminal defense hat on. If I were advising the president, as I'm sure Rudy Giuliani did and others, look, there's nothing to be gained as the result of voluntarily making yourself available for an interview, because all it does is provide fodder for a later claim that you weren't fully forthcoming, that you attempted to obstruct justice, or that you made a false statement or perjured yourself. That's the president's prerogative, as it would be
but
any
Mueller
person.
Could have forced the issue, right?
Well, he could have, but we all understand that that would raise some significant constitutional concerns that would have to have been litigated. And the greater public interest here is to get to the finish line and conclude the investigation in the country's best interest, which was done here. I think he made the right call on that.
Robert Ray, thank you very, very much. The former Whitewater independent counsel who knows something about pressure from both sides. That was then. Who knows if it's going to happen all over again now. All right, we'll have an update on this. So far, no response from the president. He's golfing today, we are told. No tweets, no reaction at all. What does that mean? I have no idea. After this.
The Attorney General Barr should be called to testify under oath before the United States Congress.
Absolutely. I cannot even imagine what will happen if he doesn't release this report.
You have a president who, in my opinion, beyond the shadow of a doubt, sought to, however ham-handedly, collude with the Russian government, a foreign power, to undermine and influence our elections.
All right, so that might be a bit of a reach there on the part of Beto O'Rourke. We should stress that even the existing indictments out there did not accuse any Americans of conspiring with Russia to alter the outcome of the election. They lied. They lied about meetings, and in some cases, they lied about trips to Moscow and elsewhere. But that was never proven in any of the cases here. So just to put that in perspective, when we get the details of this report, if and when Attorney General Barr releases those details, he's already promised that he would give at least.
We know what is in this report. It's a war and peace, a lot of pages. We don't know if there are exoneration of individuals, including the president, or this is a possibility. When I was a federal prosecutor, I used to write prosecution memos to decline cases. And in those memos, I would put the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. And we don't know if that report, if Mueller came close to charging somebody or that person was completely exonerated. We have to wait. So both sides should be very cautious and should not be spiking the football. And to go with that football analogy, I think we are at the end of the first half. And the third and fourth quarter are going to involve two forces. One is Congress. We all know what could possibly happen there with the investigative committees. But the other force in the second half of this football game, if you will, this very serious one, is you have the Southern District, the Eastern District of Virginia, New York, the New York Attorney General, the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, and Maine Justice, who have received handoff, if you will, from Robert Mueller, right. Who I got to say this, Neil, the biggest star in this whole scenario is Robert Mueller. In 22 months, he didn't go after anybody. He went after the truth. He was an umpire in a baseball game, to mix metaphors. And we got to compliment him because he didn't drag this out. He did what he had to do, and he didn't leak.
Yeah, that is remarkable. But to your point, too, at the outset there, that it has led to these splintered investigations that have morphed from Russian collusion to just business dealings, even charitable foundation activity, who was funding what at the president's inauguration. I mean, it veered wildly, of course, and maybe wisely, Bob Mueller thought, hand this off for other investigations. But did that create a mess here that could, obviously dominate the headlines of these next couple of years?
Yes, it did create a mess, but it's a mess that if you're a prosecutor, and I worked for the Department of Justice for almost 30 years, and you are handed off the football, if you will, and there's potential crimes, you have a duty to investigate, to dig deep, to find out, is there enough there to charge? It doesn't mean you are going to charge, but you have a duty. If you have a reasonable basis to think that a crime has been committed, a prosecutor has to investigate because the rule of law is paramount and no one is above the law. Now, if I were President Trump, I probably would be golfing too because there is some good news in this report filing. No indictments have been filed that we know of. No indictments have been brought. And that is good news for the president. I mean, the Democrats are disappointed, but I'm happy because Robert Mueller is a class act. I'm a big fan of his. And if he says there's no there for the Russian conspiracy, the Russian collusion, there may be a lot of red flags and loud gongs, but there's nothing to prosecute. I'm at peace with that. Now, the other people that have gotten the football, if you will, the Southern District of New York, I think that jurisdiction, that office is the biggest problem for the president because I've sat across the table from the 4 prosecutors in the Southern District on another matter that I can't talk about. And I can tell you this, those prosecutors are tough, they are brilliant, and they are relentless And if I were the president, I wouldn't be golfing tomorrow, maybe today.
Okay. Gene Rossi, thank you. And they have a wider purview, to put it mildly. Always good talking to the former federal prosecutor. And to Gene's point here, just letting you know, we're getting word from our own Ed Henry that the Attorney General, Bill Maher, is moving to get something out on this and some bullet points, principal findings out to the public as early as tonight. All right, Democrats, not across the board, but a lot of them are still saying, you know, we still have a potential constitutional crisis here with the Mueller investigation, all these others that are ensuing to be. My next guest, we've got an even bigger crisis going on at the border. No one's reporting on it. He says you should, because it is every bit the emergency the president said. Detention centers so overwhelmed that a couple of thousand of illegal immigrants have to be released, and we don't know where they go. The former acting ICE director, Tom Homan, with us now. Tom, good to have you.
Good to have you, Neil.
This seems out of control right now, Tom. What's your assessment?
Look, it's out of control. I've done this job for 34 years. The numbers on the border are historic, especially when it comes to, I'm talking about families and UACs. It's historic numbers. Based on the slide scale, if you look at it right now, who's coming in, and the numbers continue to increase, we're looking at 1 million illegal entries, 1 million people illegally entering this country. And the Border Patrol is forced to release them because there's no space in detention. You know, Border Patrol agents, I want to make something clear, because I've read a few stories on this. Border Patrol agents do not want to release these people. These people enter the country in violation of federal law, which is a crime. The last thing the Border Patrol wants to do is release them, but unfortunately the Ninth Circuit has stymied our efforts to detain these family units.
You know what's interesting too, Tom, you and I talk about, you don't have to be Republican or Democrat, a fan of the president or not, to realize that these detention centers are simply overwhelmed. And for them, that's an emergency. Now, the Democrats, of course, have been saying not enough of one to warrant building an expensive wall or declaring emergency to get your way on the wall. What do you say to that?
I say they're ignoring the data. I mean, that's what makes me angry when I talk about this. The data is clear. Every place they built a border barrier, illegal immigration has declined significantly. And drug smuggling in that area, it has proved 100% effective. Is it the answer of all answers? No. It is one tool that will make these illegal groups be funneled to an area where Border Patrol can make sure they catch every one of them. But what we got to understand, what a lot of people aren't talking about, what makes this a national security issue is that the cartels are managing these groups and sending a large group of family groups, 100, 200, 300 people to a sector, so it ties up Border Patrol assets. In the meantime, they'll move narcotics and bad people to an unmanned sector. That's what makes this dangerous, because we don't know who's coming to these unmanned sectors or how many drugs are coming to the unmanned sectors.
You know what I think has changed, Tom, but to your credit, you saw this, is that we've been so focused on the border and all of this stuff that we haven't paid enough attention to what's happening at these detention centers. And almost every single one, the same story playing out, so overwhelmed, they're forced to release individuals. Now, they're trying to go through that and make sure no bad guys get out, but that's where the trouble is, and that is where the crisis is. And I don't know any other way to describe it, but again, it's escalated literally in just the last 6 weeks alone.
It has. Look, the Ninth Circuit, specifically the Ninth Circuit, in their rulings that you can only detain family units for 20 days. Let me be clear, that was the most devastating judicial ruling that I've ever seen in my history of doing this job in 3 decades. That ruling has done more damage to this country than any judicial ruling I can remember. I mean, once they said that, because it takes about 40 days to see a judge, once they said it had to be 20 days, we knew it would happen. Matter of fact, in my affidavit during the lawsuit, I said, if you limit this to 20 days, you're going to see a surge of family units like you've never seen before. And of course, I was called a fearmonger, but look what happened. Unfortunately, I was right. But look, one thing we can do, if Congress refuses to fix the loopholes legislatively and the courts keep suing this president for trying to secure the border, what needs to happen is ICE needs to go out there, do a nationwide operation, look for these family groups that have had their due process at great taxpayer expense, and they've been ordered removed by a federal judge. We have to execute those orders and remove these people, because if we don't, if those orders mean nothing, there's no integrity in the entire system. Just go ahead and open the border up. But the reason I say this, because I did it 3 years ago. I did a nationwide operation, and guess what happened? When we sent plane loads of families home after they had the due process, the numbers on the border reduced dramatically. We got to get back into this nationwide operation. As controversial as it is, it's the law, and we have to do the right thing for this nation.
Tom Homan, thank you very much, the former acting ICE director, related to Tom's point here, the House is going to attempt to override President's veto on this emergency declaration. The votes aren't there, but they're going to try. And to Tom's point, they're wasting valuable time doing so. One more after this. All right, you were looking at presidential candidate, New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. He is in Rock Hill, South Carolina. All the major and prominent Democratic candidates are crisscrossing the country, as they do every weekend. Right now, to a man or woman, they are commenting on these latest revelations with the Mueller report out. They want to make sure that it is fully out. Everyone gets to see it. And furthermore, if there's any issue getting Mueller himself to testify on Capitol Hill, subpoena the guy. Let's go to Noel Nickbor and Kathy Arua and Deneen Borelli back with us. Subpoena Bob Mueller. What do you think?
Are you not surprised, Neil? I mean, listen, the Democrats are not going to stop. They want to create another circus like they did with the Kavanaugh hearings.
And they might not have to subpoena. Just ask him. I'm sure he'll come.
Well, probably. But with the report, obviously, it's not going in their direction because we would have seen leaks by now. So I think because of the outcome of what we're going to find out with the report, that there was no collusion, the Democrats are just going to double down and just continue to obstruct and do anything they can to be anti-Trump.
Yeah, we don't know the whole details of what's going to come. We do know, Kathy, there's a 3 p.m. meeting of all the key Democratic committees and their chiefs. No Republicans invited. Was that a mistake, you think, beyond the politics, not to make this look bipartisan, that they all act together?
But it is bipartisan because everyone wants to see the report. So I think we're all on the same page. Everyone's on the same page.
Then why don't they get Republicans to share that?
Because I think they have different motives when it comes to releasing the report. Each side is going to, which is funny, both sides have already said analyze it in different ways. One side has seen the report as, see, proof, no collusion. The other side is seeing like, wow, this is a web of lies and we can't wait to see.
No, I'm just surprised, and maybe it's just that he has other things on his mind. He's golfing today. No tweeting or comments from the president.
I know. We had talked about that earlier on the break. I don't know, because with his personality, you would think that he would feel vindicated right now and say, look, it's a nothing burger. I mean, this is what he's been living.
Can he call up, Barr and say, all right, what does it say? What does it say? What does it say?
I'm sure a call's probably already been made. I mean, if this was a report on me and something came out, I would certainly be on the phone. His non-tweeting self is very bizarre. He's on the way to go play golf right now, which is great. I mean,
there's a flip side. By the way, there's separately there. We're looking at the Justice Department. We switched to New York here. This is a few blocks from where I'm sitting. There is a pro-Trump rally going on outside the Trump Tower right now. What do you think of that, Denise?
Well, I think, if anything, to your other point, the president wants to keep the news on the fact that the report is out and that there aren't any additional indictments. So he can't win.
Or he's aware of other stuff, or people have told him, Mr. President, don't jump the gun on it.
I just think he can't win. I mean, whether he tweets or not, or stays silent or not, he just can't win.
But he never listens, though, when they tell him don't say anything, don't tweet, don't do that. He's known for doing the opposite of what they tell him to do.
And he's still lying and all that, but we don't know. But he's obviously putting in the hands of his attorney general, read the thing, see what's in the thing. There's a lot to it. If you had to give recommendations to your Democratic friends on how to proceed from here, what would you say?
Let's ignore the report and move on to other investigations, something else. Let's focus on something else.
So we've moved from collusion to charitable foundation stuff, Trump inaugural committee stuff.
I mean, it could
Trump
be a gift.
Business dealings.
The report could be a gift that keeps on giving. It's there's enough to go over.
But if
here,
it's not,
over
do you
there,
think
over
that
there.
looks? I'm thinking, well, that could risk looking a little overzealous.
You know what? It's going to force the Democrats to actually have to have a authentic message, meaning not Mueller report and impeach Trump, because everything's been on impeachment for Trump. Now, what exactly is your message? Because you're running up against, whether you like the personality of Trump or not, you're running against the economy and some pretty good things that he's got going on, some pretty good policies. Forget his personality. What exactly?
Well, he stomped on that message himself this week, going after John McCain and all the others.
But you can't forget his personality, because that's the thing that's going to, it might take away the job. I mean, as an incumbent, he should win. However, he's non-presidential, and that's what kills an incumbent every time.
Evangelicals turning their back on some of the things that Trump was accused on and voting for Trump because of other issues. So you're going to have a
ever.
of
No
that.
one wants to fire a president, you know, but he may get fired.
Well, many in your party do. Many in your party do. I'm just wondering that can overplay it. But if this is the worst for the president, at least the collusion stuff is behind him, I mean, that's a big cloud lifted, right?
It is a big cloud. And look at the accomplishments that we're seeing with the economy, with jobs, with international affairs. This is what the media, the anti-Trump media, does not want to talk about, and Democrats certainly don't want to talk about that.
Guys, I want to thank you all very, very much. We're learning from my buddy John Roberts as well that the Attorney General is going through this page by page, and now we're told he could report some of those conclusions between 3 and 5 p.m. Eastern Time today. That is significant because there is this 3 p.m. powwow among top Democrat committee heads who are waiting for just that and deciding their strategy from there. They just might have the key findings of this report to pounce on or accept or reject or pontificate on by the time they do meet.